Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Digiday Plus talk. We're going to be talking to Spencer Gordon. He's the VP of Digital for Anheuser-Busch about how to build an in-house agency. Before we talk about how to build an in-house agency with Spencer, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a rundown on the state of in-housing. So in a recent ANA survey, they found that of course, 90% of the marketers that they talked to had redone their messaging to deal with all of this. And in doing that, they relied on their in-house agencies. 55% of them in the US were relying on their in-house agency to sort of retool their marketing message at this moment, which shows their importance right now. So there was a report that my coworker Seb Joseph did where he was talking about how this moment is stress testing the in-house agency. And in doing that, he found that, companies that have already had in-house agencies in place, like Anheuser-Busch, like GlaxoSmithKline and General Mills, they were hiring for positions in their in-house teams still during this whole moment. And Donna Sharp, the managing director at MediaLink, she was talking about how, of course, clients are not, on the back of the coronavirus bringing, more in-house strategies, but they are building up the initiatives that are underway. So could accelerate. Of course, in-house teams were already growing. I've repeatedly sourced a survey from the ANA from 2018, which found that 78% of their members had in-house teams, and that was up significantly from the 2013 survey, which found that around 58% had. And, in our Digiday Plus research, we found that, the greatest benefit to having an in-house agency for the people who responded was the increased control. Also increased speed and better brand positioning. Much of the thinking about in-house agencies is that it's cheaper, but for the people who have already done it, it's the control that they really love. So, in-housing, it's become more popular over the last few years. It makes a lot of sense to do so for some marketers. And, part of that is the reduced media cost. But, one issue with, and the control and all of that I mentioned before, but one issue that people have is talent. It's not necessarily easier to hire for those positions. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And one thing we'll get into with Spencer, how you manage the talent and get that talent. But as I said at the top of this, people who have in-house agencies have been relying on them during this pandemic to deal with their creative strategy, and that's not and production, and that's not necessarily what you think of an in-house agency for first. A lot of the time it'll be search or programmatic or something like that. People try and in-house that. So maybe this moment is going to change what we think of an in-house agency for. So without further ado, I would love to bring up on this Zoom rather than on stage, Spencer Gordon, who's a VP of Digital at Anheuser-Busch, and he's going to talk to you guys about how to build an in-house agency.
Hey, Christina, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well during this crazy time. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about Draftline. So Draftline is Anheuser-Busch's internal creative agency. It's something that I started a little over 2 years ago. So pretty new in the world, but amazing to see kind of the progress that we've made over the last few years. So I think when we talked about in-housing, we were talking about, well, what's the core reason that we want to do this? It really came down to understanding and connecting data and insights with creative. So we like to position it as it's somewhere between Mad Men, which is a traditional agency, and Math Men, which is more of what you'd expect from a media agency, data analytics, insights, etc. So we were kind of trying to be that perfect hybrid in between. I think what we noticed was that we have a lot of the world-class agencies that work on our business, but there was really two sides of the house, and they weren't talking to each other. Each brand was very siloed, each agency is very siloed, so there isn't the same amount of best practice sharing that was there. So we figured if we were able to internalize this, we could focus our efforts on really helping bring things to market quickly that are informed by data. We could also share those data and best practices with our respective partner agencies that we work with. In terms of who we are, we're actually an 85-person team. So this picture actually it's a little bit outdated, about half the team that we currently have today. But we had 0 people 2 years ago, and we've been able to ramp up pretty quickly because once we were able to tap into this mindset, we've been very successful in terms of recruitment, very successful in scaling what we're able to do. And we have more brands than we've ever had to support, more channels than we've ever had to support, and just a huge need that we have across the business. In terms of what we're able to do, we really can do anything that a normal creative or media agency can do. We do design, videography, copywriting. We also, we version assets. We do localized content. We do our own data listening, social listening, data and analytics. We buy programmatic media across all channels. So pretty robust in terms of our capabilities, and we are able to deliver all of this in-house. We also do work with partners in some areas as well when we need extra help or extra supply. However, I think the key difference between what we do as a company versus what most external agencies would do is we're connecting everything in the same process, right? So as we hand things off, everything is cohesive, it's clear, but data is at the center of everything that we do. And that's the key difference. So no matter where you start on this wheel, it starts with social listening, it moves to strategy, creative, et cetera. It moves around the wheel. It's always rooted in data. What's working, what's not working, how can we do it better, how does it revolve around the consumer, et cetera. And I think this is really the key difference and something that we think is the most impactful for the business. So by getting that all in place, I think we're lucky that we started 2 years ago, right? Because by the time coronavirus hit, we actually had a full team ready to go. And it's never been busier for us than it has in the last few months. I think the first thing that we thought about was, okay, if you think about the climate of the world, the world's changing in a big way. People aren't going outside. They're on lockdown in their respective states. There aren't really that many sports or entertainment vehicles that are going on. That's really important for our business overall as an alcohol producer. And so when we started thinking about this, really a lot of our media shifted to digital, and a lot of our time and attention shifted to digital. So when we thought about this, Draftline kind of came to the rescue in a big way. However, I think it's really important before we actually were able to do anything or action anything, we really tried to root ourselves in key marketing principles that we have here at Anheuser-Busch. The number one thing was we have to make sure that we take care of people, both internally and externally. This is an unprecedented time in the world. People are reacting in a lot of different ways. We need to make sure that everything that we do is sensitive to consumers and that we're actually trying to help them, right? That we put our brands and our causes to life so we can help people in need and really take care of them. I think the second part of it is, in the first couple of weeks, I think everyone thought that this was something that was going to be a blip on the radar. And now it's the new normal, right? We need to make sure our brands are able to market and be around for consumers because people love our brands. They're part of their daily lives. We need to adapt to this new normalcy and make sure that our brands and our marketing plans are able to do that as well. And then the last thing is we have to add value. We have to find a reason and make sure that our brands are relevant to consumers. They're not just there. They're not just interrupting them, but they're trying to make their day just a little bit better. So these three things were important for what we were about to do from the next perspective. So the first thing we did is we started back with data, right? Who are our consumers? What are they talking about? What are trends that are emerging? How do we take this information to really uncover insights that we could then translate to our marketing plans and to our creative? So by looking at this, we did an early segmentation. This is from, the first week or two of the coronavirus here in the US. We started looking, what are conversation starters? What are people talking about? What are trends that are emerging? So people going to gaming and people moving to streaming, people talking about virtual happy hours and hanging out, catching up with old friends, etc. So we started to segment this into key pillars and then doing deep dives into each area that consumers were talking about, really looking and saying, okay, what are the differences between segments? What are people saying? How are they saying it? When are they saying it? And how do we get our brands to be part of culture in a relevant way that is also sensitive to the situation, right? And thinking about their lives and how we can add value. So the first thing that we did was talk about how our brands can give back to the community. Think, this was not a moment for advertising. This is a moment for help and for causes. So we started bringing things to life. So just a couple examples here. For Bud Light, we started helping all the accounts that are on premise, so bars and restaurants, helping them open for takeout. Right, I think for us, growing awareness that they were able to do this in the early days was something that people weren't sure of. We were trying to help our business partners and help the communities that were in need. We instantly made donations to some of our long-term partners, including the Red Cross. We were able actually to transfer money from our sports sponsorships to help use some of the stadiums that we partner with so dearly to host blood drives, because blood drives are in huge demand at the moment. In addition, we started making hand sanitizers. We had programs to offer support for people who had canceled weddings, to do an online graduation ceremony for college grads that were getting canceled. We were doing initiatives around student debt, and some of the things that we did around natural light. And we also had foster a dog, so people could actually provide, shelter to animals in need, and also, something to help with their own mental well-being while in lockdown. The second thing that we needed to really make sure that we were able to do is provide entertainment at the at-home occasion. So now more than ever, people kind of have a little bit less to do, or there's nowhere to go. We wanted to make sure that there was something that our brands could bring fun and excitement back to their lives. So we started doing online concerts and live streams across brands, with our biggest ones around Bud Light. We started doing at-home workouts for people to get active for Michelob Ultra, a brand that stands for fitness. We started having people check in on each other with Budweiser, saying, what's up, like reinventing an old commercial that we had to make sure that you were checking in with friends in a time of need. And we're partnering with chefs and celebrities to help bring the at-home occasion for food and cooking to life across Stella Artois. So by doing this, each brand is picking a very specific program for something that they stand for, that they could help bring to life for a consumer perspective. And it all goes back to that social listening and to that data segmentation in the upfront. In addition, from a Draftline perspective, we actually had to go through every single ad and marketing campaign, sign making template, display banner, social ad, to go back and change the language and the occasions of what were happening in our content. So we look at this, we basically were adapting the messaging in real time to make sure it was sensitive to the current situation, that it had stuff that appealed to the at-home occasion, that we weren't showing big concerts and other things that we normally would because they aren't happening right now in society. And I think overall, we were able to do this very, very quickly and successfully. And a big part of it, the speed, was because we had that in-house team. And then finally, I think the big focus for us was really doubling down on e-commerce. And same thing as before, we had to adapt our messaging to make sure it appealed to the in-home occasion, drastically increase the media buys around this space because people aren't able to go to bars and restaurants. They were ordering from home. A lot of people weren't going to grocery stores. So we really wanted to make sure that our brands were prevalent, and that after our initiatives of giving back to the community and helping entertain people, that we were actually able to grow our brands and keep our brands relevant at this time. So we actually were able to deliver hundreds of e-commerce assets localized to cities, localized to states, with very specific partners, depending on the legalities in the states, to make sure that our brands were present and that we could sell beer. So I think overall, the benefits of being internal are exactly what Christina was touching on. But for us, the number one most important thing was connecting data to creative. Because when you're able to do that, you can really go forward and you can put the consumer first. You're thinking about who they are, what are they looking for, how are they talking about our brands, how are they talking in culture, how do we make our brands relevant to them? The second piece of that is really understanding what are they talking about, and more importantly, how are they talking about it? What's the sentiment? How are they feeling at this moment in time? When are they talking about stuff? So I think for us, really getting to what they are talking about allows our brands to be relevant for them and more important than ever. The next thing is, how do we add value to them? How do we make sure that our brand is there and it's something that is incremental to their lives that makes their day a little bit better? The fourth and fifth point here, I think, are the differentiator and something that we take extra seriously, especially in this time. The fourth one is we have to pressure test all ideas. In today's day and age, you never know how someone's going to react to a piece of content or a specific campaign that you're running. I think for right now, with coronavirus, people are very conscious of what the brands and governments and various institutions are doing, and we want to make sure nothing can be misinterpreted. So we actually established our routine where we had groups of people that would come up with ideas, and then another group of people who would be pressure testing them, thinking about every single way that they could be misinterpreted, thinking about if they were sensitive to the situation, et cetera, to make sure that it could fit in this day and age. And then the fifth point here is really the beautiful thing about in-house and about digital. It's all about test and learning and iterating what you're doing. Test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. I think for us, that's been a key initiative of Draftline. Over the last 2 years, I've iterated the org chart probably 15 different times to make sure that we were adjusting to the business need bringing in the right talent, constantly iterating our approach and our processes, the ways that we work with the brands internally, as well as our external partners from an agency perspective. And I think that really paid dividends right now within coronavirus, because we started with all these campaigns, we put them out into the world. We're seeing what's not working. We're making real-time decisions, adapting content and messaging on the fly, and then putting them back in there. So overall, we've seen tremendous improvements in all of our digital results across the board. And in addition, we're getting smarter with how we approach. We're learning faster, and we're putting better content out for our consumers. So I think now is an important time that people consider this. At the end of the day, having an in-house agency is important because it's the one central hub that allows you to work across all your brands and all your agency partners. So for us, that was the most important thing. And for now, at a moment where there's chaos, there is something that's helping disseminate the standardized messaging and the best practices across everything to move quickly. So with that, I think we're going to open up for questions, but I really appreciate you guys taking the time to let me walk you through Draftline.
Okay, that was awesome, Spencer. Thank you so much. Obviously with the conceit of this whole talk, how to build out an in-house agency, you're 2.5 years into it, you have 85 people now. Why don't you walk the audience through a little bit of, what you guys brought in-house first and what you were building out first and how you sort of built out those teams?
So I think for us, we really started with the stuff that was the lowest hanging fruit: community management, programmatic media, and data and analytics. I think for us, without that information, our creatives, they would just be any other agency. There's no advantage to doing that. It's not necessarily cheaper, right, to go hire a team of people that have totally different career path and skill set, onboard all the new processes and creative tools and things that we would need it. So we started from that perspective because, again, it went back to, we need that one central hub where we could share information with all of our partners. And if we want to be serious about understanding the consumer, we need to have the pieces that allow us to deep dive into who is our consumer, what are they talking about, what are they doing. So we started there, and then over time, we added in the creative elements. And the creative elements then allowed us to action the data and insights, right? It allowed us to move fast, change the messaging, and create something that was, a little bit more aesthetic, right, that we could bring to
yeah. For sure. Obviously, if you guys have questions for Spencer, I'm going to get to those shortly. So send those in, and I'll ask him. But okay, so you start with those. How many people would you say you started with? And is that something you would suggest to other marketers who are looking to build out an in-house agency? Do you need to start with as you put it, the low-hanging fruit?
So I think it really depends on what that low-hanging fruit is for your business or for your brand. For us, we're a pretty big company, right? And so I think from that perspective, it was easier to start with the things that we already did. It was like a slower burn into the whole creative agency world, a tester to see, can we take some of the pieces that are important and are also core to our business. So I think that was the first point. I think for other brands, if you're a digital brand where your brand lives online, if you're a new to world direct to consumer brand or a product, design would be something that's super impactful, because even if you don't understand the data and analytics and customer segmentation, you're able to modify what you're doing. That can add a ton of value, a ton of speed, and it can save you a lot of money because you're not paying for multiple iterations. So if you're trying to figure something out for the first time, it's a good way to test and learn. So I think it depends. I would always start small, because you don't know what you don't know until you start doing it. So I think for me, I had never worked at a creative agency. A lot of this was just gathering information from other people, interviewing a ton of people that worked at agencies, talking with our partners that were, our core partners that we love and we trust and we know, and they work closely with our business. It was talking with other companies that did in-house studios, and it was kind of seeing like what worked for you, what didn't work for you, what are things that you wish that you knew. And it started with a small team. To be honest with you, when we did, it was, there was no people on the team, and I hired a few. And then, when we got to 4 or 5 people, I was super involved in every decision that we were making. And then by the time, that started being successful, we started then taking on new case studies and ways to scale. So I think the important thing that we did is we did not mandate that any brand use Draftline. I think that's an important distinction that people have to make. It's not like it was a top-down thing saying, hey, everyone, you have to use Draftline, and this has to be, one of the partners that you worked with. We started small. We proved ourselves, we pitched ideas, we were able to then deliver on the creative, right, that we were making. And then we would go to the next brand and do the same thing. And then slowly but surely, the rumor kind of got out. We could help. Here's ways that we could do it. We were fast. We were connecting to data. And then over time, we were able to scale. So I would definitely start small. I would start in the core business that you think makes the most sense for you, whether that's the right brain or the left brain. And then I would really make sure that you're thinking and not afraid to make changes in the upfront and scaling over time.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a research period where you were sort of building a case maybe to bring in this in-house agency. How long was that? Who did you talk to? And, was it hard to convince people that, an in-house agency is an investment? You do have to get the buy-in.
Totally. So it's an interesting question. We took a few weeks. I would say it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks to do our research. We set up meetings with some other large brands that had internalized a part of the team or all of the team that they'd work with. So, brands that you might know in the industry that have it, Spotify, Chobani, Pepsi. We also spoke with some of our big agency partners that we work with, right, just to kind of see what they did, how they structured their team, telling them how we were planning on bringing on work, et cetera. We talked with production companies to say, hey, like when you work with an agency, how do they work with you? And then ultimately we started interviewing people, right? And as we interviewed people and brought a few on, they came with referrals and they came with best practices from their various backgrounds. So I think we were able to kind of learn that over time. So the first 3 or 4 weeks was purely research and then me building out the case study of what we should do and the business plan. To be honest with you, there were a ton of headwinds when we initially started. No brand wants to work with an agency that has no people, no processes, and no experience, right? So we had to earn the credibility of that. And I think it was really important, from our perspective, to hire someone that was an internal person to lead the agency. Because, I had come from the brands, I had done digital and media in the company. And so I knew the stakeholders really well. I knew the need. And I have like a twofold role where I lead digital for Anheuser-Busch and I also lead Draftline. So I'm kind of like the person saying, this is what we should do. This is the direction we should go in. And also Draftline can be part of the solution. So I think that was very helpful. So we were able to convince, obviously our CMO was behind it. And at the time, our head of consumer connections, Joao Chueri, who was my former boss, the two of us were behind it. So we built a case study and we asked people if they wanted to work with us. And then basically over time, we grew and grew and grew. But we faced an enormous amount of headwinds just in terms of process across all departments, right? Because just because marketing wants to do something or a specific team on marketing wants to do something doesn't mean that every other stakeholder in the business wants to, right? So, I mean, if you think about an agency, what does that mean? It means you need a ton of new tools and resources. So we got to talk to our IT team. It means that you need to change payment terms so you can move fast on a production the same way that you would with an external agency. So we had to talk with procurement. We incur a huge amount of liability and risk because we're putting messaging out directly to the world versus having an agency do it. So we had to talk with legal. So there's a lot of stakeholders that we had to convince over time. And at first, no one wanted to do it. But I think what we were able to do is show the speed, show that we could bring in creatives that would help us grow the talent pool within Anheuser-Busch, help change the profile of the company, help make us a better client, help us become more digitally savvy in a world where we need to become more digitally savvy to survive. And then slowly but surely, the haters, if you will, became lovers, right? And they became people that started supporting. And then instead of headwinds, we were able to turn the mass and get tailwinds, right? And I think for us, that's where the growth really started picking up and where we've had success. And now I think the beauty of it is we've established a team that's pretty large, and it's trusted across departments, and it's growing because everyone's bought in, everyone sees the vision and sees the value. And I think actually right now it's been the moment to shine for us because it took 2 years to get to where we are, building out the team, building out the process, and then coronavirus happened. And I think this is bringing out the best of us in a large way. Because we're providing information we wouldn't have been able to provide 2 years ago. We're able to action it. We're able to make changes to things that would have cost us a ton of money before to just iterate on the content that we were doing. And I think we care. We're owners of the company, right? So I think because of that, we're able to really reflect, what we want our brands to represent to the world. So I think it's been a really cool process. Ton of challenges. It was not easy, but it's definitely paid off with dividends for us.
For sure. We love to talk about payment terms, and you just mentioned them. What payment terms did you have to change to be for the in-house agency?
Yeah, so I mean, we as a large company have long payment terms, right? I think it's because we're used to working with huge suppliers to help us bring things to life in, bottling and in farming and stuff that goes into the actual product that we have. different from an advertising perspective because we're one company. So, when we have rush jobs or we have to, hey, like we need to do a production tomorrow, or I have to pay a micro influencer, paying an individual person is a lot different than paying a Fortune 500 company that we work with. So having flexibility there to then work with our team to say, hey, like we need an exception for this, or, this is something that we should think through is really the difference. But I won't go into the specifics of like what that is though. Yeah.
Got it. So you're not going to be able to tell me if it's like, we got them to extend to 120 days or something like that.
No, I won't go through that.
Okay, well, we won't get you in trouble there.
Okay, thank you.
Now, you said you had 15 different org charts in the 2.5 years that you have been building out this in-house agency. What can our audience learn from your organizational hiccups, I guess? I don't know.
I think the biggest thing is, first of all, that's not a bad thing, having so many org charts and iterations, because it means that there's growth, and it means that we're constantly relooking and how to improve what we're doing. So I would say don't be afraid to get it right on the first time. Like, you won't get it right on the first time. You will iterate. And if you're not iterating, you're probably doing something wrong, right? Just start there. But I think for me, it started because if you have a team of 4 and you have a team of 85, you have to have a reporting structure that can withstand that. So we started with, some of our more junior team. And what we did over time is we built out the senior team as we got more buy-in. And I think that helped us then crystallize what we were doing and be the capstone. It was tough originally to convince senior creatives to leave an agency or to leave another in-house studio to come to something that was undefined, that didn't have a huge career path and trajectory. And then I think what happened is, as we started to get better and better and put better work into the world, started getting awards, started getting notoriety, started getting articles and things written about us, it was easier then to convince those senior people. And then success breeds more success. And creatives talk, and I think that there's a network of people that you can tap into. And then all of a sudden we were able to grow and grow and grow. And so we kind of built the org chart in parallel. Well, it started with the bottom, it grew horizontally. We filled in then with the senior creatives that we needed, and we basically started growing vertically and really expanding in that way. And I think then we had to put in a mechanism that we could support an individual brand and have brand dedication and understand what the needs of one, but then also balance the things that we needed across the portfolio to really enhance our capabilities.
Yeah, for sure. One of our audience questions, they ask, you mentioned that Draftline buys media, makes creative, etc., but you also work with agency partners. Can you elaborate on how Draftline partners with agencies and what that partnership looks like? Also, do you directly work with publishers?
We have not really started working as closely with publishers as I would like, but I think that's going to be something that we want to start doing in a much bigger way in future. We do work with publishers from a buying perspective, right, for our inventory and negotiating deals, etc. From a creative perspective, it's been a little bit more limited, I would say. But I think in terms of just overall, for us, we're totally open to expanding. And I think if we think of publishers, like, they know consumers really, really well. They have to. That's their whole business, right? So I think for us, it's something that we want to learn a little bit more from, just because our brands are here to be consumer first in that way. Can you just repeat the first question of the two?
Yeah, working with agency partners.
Sure.
What that's like.
Yes, I love working with our agency partners. I mean, I think when we look at the roster of agency partners that we have, we work with some of the best, if not the best, agencies in the world. We are an enormous company with a lot of creative needs, but the creative needs have splintered and expanded tremendously over the last few years. I think the growth of digital media and just the channel has made it way more complex. If you look at your phone, you look at each individual app that exists, each app has totally different specs. They might have 10, 20, 30 different specs and types of inventory that exist. So a campaign that used to have maybe 10 assets now maybe has thousands or hundreds. And so there was more need than we ever had. So we needed to find a way to work with our agencies on big ideas and things that are strategic, and also complement them with iterations and versioning and et cetera. And in addition, we used to have 10 brands that we supported with media dollars. Now it's dozens and dozens and dozens of brands, because the industry has also changed in a big way. People want different flavors, people want different preferences, there's different price points, different packs. So we work with a huge amount of innovation and new to world brands that we would otherwise never have been able to support. So for us, it actually has complemented our agencies. I would say that most of the agencies that we work with have probably grown from Draftline, because the business need has also grown tremendously. So we were able to kind of grow the whole pie together. And then I think in terms of then the ways of working, no two brands work the same way. We have large brands that work with dozens of agencies because they have to work with specialist agencies in specific ways. We have small brands where we're the only agency. So I think from a Draftline perspective, the one common thing and the one thing we do for everyone is we do provide social listening, community management, data and analytics, and programmatic media buying for everyone. I think for that basis, no matter who we work with, we're working with creative agencies to give them insights and analytics. We're working with our traditional media agency to plan out what we're doing and making sure that our digital media is talking with our traditional media. But in general, it's mostly sharing the best practices because, at Draftline, we're also the client. There's people from my team that were on brands 2 months ago, and there's people from Draftline that are on brands. And our one goal is not to improve Draftline's bottom line. We don't, we're here to support Anheuser-Busch and really make sure that we're growing overall as a business. And if we're able to do that, our external partners will also, benefit tremendously.
Yeah, for sure. It must have been quite strange for those agencies you guys work with to interview them about what they do for you guys. One thing.
It's funny, really quick on that, Christina.
Yeah.
When I had first started, I had worked in all these different roles on brand teams, and then when people found out my new role and that I was going to be starting this internal agency, I think it burned a lot of bridges. Like people didn't want to talk to me anymore, and it kind of ruined some relationships that I had started. But now I'm proud to say that 2 years later, those have been repaired, and I think they've been strengthened because they're seeing that we're not here to replace agencies. We want to work with agencies. That makes us better, and it brings external partners and better creative thinking and case studies externally. And they're seeing the value that, hey, if we can work together on something, we can either divide and conquer, or we can work together to make something stronger. And I actually think it's been an amazing evolution, and really cool to see it come to life. So that's probably my proudest accomplishment is the way that we've been able to support and work with some of our existing partners.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you if you guys have saved money from, having the programmatic in-house. That's something we've talked to Bayer, for example, about. And, I think Josh Plow over there got in a little bit of trouble because, he said an exact figure. I would love to get the same from you if you're willing.
So I'm not willing to give an exact figure, but what I would say is we're not about saving money. We're about creating value. So if you think there might be some areas that we're saving money in, but then we're putting that money into other things that will help us, support the agency and support the business overall. So as an example, having, all the different tools that you need to be successful from a software perspective and a hardware perspective and starting an agency, all of those things were incremental to our portfolio. They cost a fortune. We have to pay 85 people that we didn't pay 2 years ago, right? So we have to fund those things. So we're definitely funding them from some of the things that we're able to save on. But what I would say is Draftline hasn't incurred an incremental dollar to the business, right? We're repurposing dollars the way that we would need to make sure that we can exist and be supportive, but it has not interrupted or interfered with any of our, what we would call our agency fees or our production dollars. It's just be working smarter and having the same amount work a lot harder for us.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. How many ads did you actually redo for coronavirus? I know we talked about that in our initial conversation, and you were like, it's hundreds. Do you have a number? How many did you actually do?
I don't know the exact amount across all channels. Sure. I can probably follow up with that. I know from an e-commerce perspective, we created over 500 different assets in the first week that we were up and running. So those were new to world assets, versioning out ones that we had done before, changing the language on them, etc. That was just from e-commerce. So then if you look, it's thousands by now, but I'm not sure the total.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's go to another audience question. Let's see. How closely do you collaborate with your earned media colleagues in developing ideas that can also develop press coverage?
Extremely closely. So I'd say that one of the beauties of having an internal agency is that you can tap into those opportunities much faster, and you're able to create specifically for them. So I like to think of earned media in two ways. There's PR, traditional PR that works with publishers that can help us talk about it. And there's also people sharing your content or talking about them online that you're not paying for, right? So two different forms in my part of earned media. We work extremely closely with the PR team and what people think of as traditional earned media, because we want to make sure that we're getting a pulse on what the industry is talking about, what coverage is going on, what publishers talk about, what tastemakers are talking about in culture. In addition, we want to see what our consumers are saying. We want to make sure that our brands are relevant online. And so I think what we do, we share a ton of reporting, right? We actually do the reporting for the traditional PR team. We help them because we want to calibrate across. Plus, a lot of publishers are posting online, right? So if Digiday goes and tweets something about Anheuser-Busch, like we want to make sure we capture that. So I think we share a lot of it. Plus, we do a lot of, when we have campaigns, making sure that we get the right assets and things to help us specifically help from a PR perspective. Great question.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then with so many partners across the ecosystem on the demand and supply side, how did you choose which platforms to lean in with to give you the control and transparency you need?
I think we started, I think, from a digital perspective with our social partners. I think one of the things that we found to be tremendously helpful is that, when you talk with Google and Facebook and Twitter, Snapchat, like a lot of these partners that we work with, they're huge and we work with them across every brand, but they also have a direct relationship with the customer. And it's almost like a marketplace, right? So publishers are there, consumers are there, brands are there. Those partners we've leaned on pretty heavily to understand like what's going on, what should we be thinking, what are best practices. But I think since then we brought on very strategic partners from that perspective to say, hey, how do we want to think about the future? How did you win in this space? What are ways that you're working here? How do we tap in? So we started with a smaller group of people to go deeper. And I think now we've been expanding tremendously from there.
Sure. Okay. You spoke earlier about vetting past media for problematic messaging during this pandemic. What are some of the questions that your strategy asks while reviewing past campaigns? That was one of the questions. I think they.
Just what I was referencing before is we vetted all of our existing communications, right? All the messaging that we had out there to make sure that we weren't saying things that were insensitive to this situation, right? So if you have something with coronavirus and it talks about getting together, right? It's probably not the best messaging in this moment in time. We actually want to do the opposite about social distancing. So we had to go through all of our existing ads that were there and make sure that we were either retiring them, pausing them, scrubbing them, making changes to them to make sure that we were giving the right message that is supportive of what the government was saying, what consumers are saying, what was right in culture. In terms of media, I mean, we look at sites to make sure that they're safe, they're compliant, that they're legal drinking age and above. That hasn't changed. We've been very consistent there as well.
Yeah. Have you been taking a regional approach at all to your marketing and like the messages, because it's different in each state?
Totally. First of all, we do all the time because the legalities within alcohol are different within each state as well. So that's something we've done for a long time. But I think right now, one of the benefits of Draftline has been that we've been able to take a message and make it local, right? So that's been a big focus of our team. I think what we're observing as a company is when we go local, we tend to do significantly better and win more frequently. So we've been doing localized campaigns. We're doing more personalization at scale. We're figuring out ways to talk to individuals as individuals, which is really important. And in addition, Draftline, we actually just opened our first regional office. So we just opened one in Miami. We have a small satellite office there where we're able to then kind of deep dive into one of our biggest and most important states, which is Florida and the Southeast region for us. So I'm excited to say that we're going to try and go even deeper here because we have more and more brands that are regional and local that we want to make sure that we support adequately and that we understand kind of the lingo and what people are talking about in that area.
Sure. Another audience question here. Are brand managers moving into the Draftline fold, or do Draftline media and account leads serve brand teams like a traditional agency culture structure?
So I think one of the beauties of Draftline, one of the things that we really wanted to achieve when we were setting it up was a cross-pollination between Draftline and between Anheuser-Busch. So the idea is Draftline sits within our marketing department. I sit within our marketing department. The idea was, okay, can we actually take people that are brand managers, digital brand managers in PR, on the media team, et cetera, and can we bring them into Draftline and take people who are strategists and project managers and art directors and other things and bring them into the brand teams? Part of the reason was because we wanted to upskill our own brand teams. We want them to be more digitally savvy, understand more about the creative process, et cetera. And then part of it was also because we want our agency partners and our internal agency to be more business savvy, to understand why we do things, not just let's just do this, right? So by having a basic understanding of like our sales and our products and what things are working, our creatives are pitching ideas that are feasible, right? That actually solve a business need for us, I think in a way that is very helpful because they're hearing directly from people who used to be on the brands or having that direct relationship with the brands. So what I would say is Draftline's become kind of a creative arm of the brand teams or the media arm of the brand teams, which has helped, I think, go back to speed and transparency and a few other things that have benefited. But I think at the same time, again, that's helped us with our external agencies as well, because we're bringing them closer, because we're understanding now by working with our own team saying, hey, how do we become a better client? How do we treat our agency, right? How do we give direction in a way that's clear, that manifests in action, that's rooted in a business problem that we can go and solve? And so I think what we've really done is we've made ourselves a better client and a better marketer overall.
It's funny, it seems counterintuitive to be like, all right, so we're going to put the in-house agency and the brand teams and then the agencies over here. It seems counterintuitive to be like, oh, we're actually closer now, but I understand what you're saying.
I think it does seem kind of like, again, I think when you initially talk about we want to in-house a team, it means that you're bringing it from out of the house into the house. But that's not how I really look at it. I look at it as you're upskilling your own team, and you're maybe like bringing on a different skill set. But that skill set might actually attract people that are outside the house, right, in a much better way. They're able to connect in a deeper way. We have people that understand how they think and how they approach a problem. So I think for us, it's just a question of how you set up the process internally. And I think we made it super clear to our agency partners that this was going to help them and not hurt them, that we were going to free up time and effort for them to think about other things or to collaborate with now deeper information. And I think now we're unlocking potential, and it's been a great journey, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that we have one more audience question if you have a second. It was, when and how do you decide to opt for freelance resources versus reach out to an agency partner? Assuming in the above scenario you are facing resource constraints.
Yes, great question. I mean, we do both a lot, right? I think for us, we have existing relationships with agency partners that we tap into all the time that are AORs or that do a specific task for a brand. And that's not going to go away. We're going to keep doing that. I think in addition, we have the Draftline team, which helps support, or it depends on the size of the brand. A new to world brand, we might do everything. It depends. Sometimes the brands are the ones to dictate where they want the work to go, right? We try and leave it out of, I mean, Draftline's not the decision maker, it's the brand team. So we participate in pitching for ideas that are open pitches, and we don't always win the business, right? Like as a Draftline team, we work with our procurement team to help them find partners. Like we're not able to do it, we refer some of our production houses or partners that we will lean on to the brands as well, because again, if it can help the business, it can help the business. And then I think in addition, there's times where it's the timeline is very tight. We don't have time to go through the normal bidding process, et cetera, that we might bring on freelance or something that's a little bit more controlled in the office, because you can move fast on it and it doesn't require the same long-term projects. I would say for that though, it's usually smaller things, not the big stuff that an agency would like. It's not a Super Bowl commercial that we're doing that for, obviously, right? So I think it depends on the expertise, it depends on the type of work, it depends on the timeline. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But what I would say is we do use freelance frequently within Draftline. That goes back to the changes in people and procurement and legalities that we have to work through. We do that to make sure that we have the right people there, that we're able to plus up or plus down if there's a really busy time or if there's not, and that we're able to also get fresh blood, fresh creative ideas and things into our talent pipeline.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's leave it on fresh blood, I guess.
Great.
Thank you so much, Spencer.
Yes,
I appreciate it.
And thank you to all of you who stuck around to hear me, and for Digiday for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.